Thank you so much. Just listening to the network of women that have brought you here tonight, Talia, was beautiful, and it really makes me think about the network that we've established, and that is going to be even stronger after tonight's inaugural oration, which I'm very excited about. Like, this network was born from a shared belief that our communities thrive when women are equally represented in leadership across local government, community boards and decision-making spaces. And this annual oration we begin tonight is not only a platform for bold ideas and courageous leadership, it's a commitment to continuing momentum forward together. So thank you so much for joining us tonight for this special evening. We have a few VIPs that we'd like to recognise and acknowledge for their presence tonight. It's very exciting to have our guest speaker, Dr. Niki Vincent, who is the Victoria's Public Sector Gender Equity Commissioner, who will be delivering our oration tonight. Libby Coker, our federal member for Corangamite and the patron of Empowering Women 50/50 Network. It's great also to have Christine Cousins, our state member for Geelong, and also City of Greater Geelong councillors, Councillor Emma Sinclair and Councillor Rowan Story, and some of the junior councillors who are also here this evening. We also have from the Surf Coast Shire Deputy Mayor, Councillor Libby Stapleton, and Councillor Liz Patterson. From Golden Plains Shire, Councillor Emma Robin, and also from the City of Greater Geelong, CEO Ali Wasty, and Director of Corporate Services, Troy Edwards. It's wonderful also to be joined by Helen Bolton, the CEO of Respect Victoria, Jodie Hill, CEO of Women's Health and Wellbeing Barwon Southwest, Beryl McMillan, who is the President of the Zonta Club for Geelong and also a WILD committee member, and Kate Lockhart, the President of WILD Inc. We have a few apologies. You know, it's a busy timetable, so we very much appreciate to hear back from Minister Gail Tierney, Ella George MP, Sarah Mansfield MP, Alison Marchant MP, and also Councillors Elise Wilkinson and Melissa Cadwell from the City of Greater Geelong, and also Isabel Tolhurst, Councillor from the Borough of Queenscliff. Whew, that's a lot. But isn't it great who we've got in the room? Also, individuals and organisations who are members of this very important network that we have in Geelong. So thank you so much for all being here. So on to the oration. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Dr. Niki Vincent. She's an award-winning leader and change maker with a diverse background spanning statutory offices, academia, business and the community sector. She currently serves as Victoria's inaugural Public Sector Gender Equity Commissioner, where she leads the implementation of Australia's first Gender Equity Act, driving systematic change across 300 organisations and 450,000 employees and the broader community. Dr. Vincent's career includes senior roles such as the South Australian Commissioner for Equal Opportunity, the CEO of the Leader of Institute of South Australia, and a member of the Remuneration Tribunal of South Australia. Please join with me in welcoming Dr. Niki Vincent to deliver the 2025 inaugural oration for the Empowering Women 50/50 Network.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. And Talia, thank you so much. That was really, really beautiful. You did your aunties proud, for sure. I also want to acknowledge that we're meeting on Wadawurrung country and pay my respects to elders, past, present, emerging leaders, and any other First Nations people here today. And of course, it's NAIDOC week, so happy NAIDOC week. We've been doing some NAIDOC events in my team and for the last couple of days and have another one tomorrow. I'm not going to go through that long list of VIPs again, so I just want to acknowledge them and add my acknowledgement to the one that's already happened. happened. It's a real honour to deliver the inaugural oration for the Empowering Women 50/50 Network. And thank you to Women in Local Democracy, WILD, the Empowering Women 50/50 Network and the Geelong Library Geelong Library Corporation for hosting this important event and for your ongoing work to support gender equality in local leadership. It's a privilege also to be here among so many passionate and committed people from across Geelong, the Surf Coast, Queenscliff, Golden Plains and Colac Otway. All places, as a South Australian, I've had the pleasure of visiting in my first 4.5 years as the Commissioner here. I've spent a lot of time, in fact, I've prioritised getting out to regions and meeting our duty holders, as many as I can. I'm nearly there with regional and rural Victorian duty holders. I've got a couple more trips and then we'll have done the whole of Victoria, and now I'm focusing on the metro organisations as well. But local government is the tier of government closest to community. It delivers the services that people rely on every single day, including maternal and child health care, libraries, aged care, community infrastructure, waste and recreation. Importantly, councils deliver services that women disproportionately use and rely on. Women are more likely to be primary carers for children and elderly relatives, and more likely to use public transport, and more likely to access health services or community health services. And this means that decisions about infrastructure, about planning, about service delivery have direct and often gendered impacts. Local government is also often the first point of political participation for women, and it's where so many women begin their political journeys, building the skills and the networks that can take them to state and federal levels. And that's why representation matters. When people making decisions reflect the community or the people that they serve, we do see more inclusive policies, more responsive services and stronger communities. And this is why the Victorian government set a target for women to make up 50% of councillors and mayors by 2025. Now, sadly, we didn't meet that, in spite of the incredibly hard work that WILD and other advocacy groups and lots of local councils put in to try and get that figure to the 50%. In fact, the proportion of women councillors in Victoria dropped slightly to 43% from 43.8% for the 2024 elections compared to 2020. That said, 38% of Victorian councils do have 50% or greater women's representation. So that's something to celebrate. And metropolitan areas are leading the way, with more than 60% of metro councils having 50% women elected, or more than 50%. But that representation is uneven. Some councils only have one woman elected, and rural councils in particular lag behind with only 37% female representation on average. Here in Geelong, sadly, we only have 27% representation, and that's a decline from 36% in 2020. But Victoria does still maintain its position as the national leader in women's representation in local government, although the gap is closing between us and other states. Tasmania and Queensland are now very close behind Victoria, with all three states having over 42% women. And it's notable that for several years, the country's most populous state, New South Wales, had the lowest percentage of women councillors in the country. But in 2021 and in 2024, the state government provided funding to both ALGA and Women for Election to run forums in 2 elections, and the state has increased from below 30% to now just over 40%. So that just shows you what can happen in a short space of time. So don't give up. It's a small backward step, but generally, over time, we're heading in a better direction, in a more positive direction. And the power of data like this is that it makes the invisible visible. And when people see patterns they hadn't noticed before, it becomes much harder to dismiss concerns about inequality just as individual grievances. And that's why the Gender Equality Act, which I implement, is such a powerful tool in helping us create change. Gender equality is often framed as a social issue or a moral issue, and it absolutely is. But it's also a structural, an economic, and a governance issue. When we address gender inequality, we're not just doing the right thing. We're improving the quality of public institutions, our services, and our decision-making. And the research is clear. Gender equal organisations do actually perform better. They're more innovative, they're more collaborative, and they're more trusted. They make better use of talent and they make better decisions. But gender inequality doesn't just show up in boardrooms and budget lines. It shows up in who gets heard, who gets promoted, who carries the load of unpaid care, who feels safe at work, and who gets to lead. And unless we address it systematically, it will quietly persist, shaping outcomes in ways that often go unseen. And this is why gender equality must be at the core of how we plan, how we govern, and how we serve. The Gender Equality Act is the first of its kind in Australia, and it continues to be the only act of its kind in Australia. Other states have been talking a bit about doing something like this, and South Australia, I know at one stage, had a bill which just had, it was exactly ours, and it just had Victoria scribbled out and South Australia put in there, which we were fine with because, you know, that's great. You don't need to reinvent the wheel when you've got something good here already. It was, though, the result of decades of work by women's organisations, women's health professionals, academics, unions, and other gender equality advocates. And that shows because it's an incredible piece of legislation. It's just about to be open for review. So if you've got some thoughts, please do put in a submission. I certainly will be. There are some tweaks that are needed, but nevertheless, it's still very, very good and very comprehensive. The turning point, though, for the germination of the Act was the 2015 Royal Commission into Family Violence, and the outcome there was that it underscored gender inequality as one of the key drivers of violence against women. Following that, the state government launched Safe and Strong, Victoria's first gender equality strategy, and the late Minister Fiona Richardson was instrumental in advancing the case for gender equality legislation, and that work was continued by the Minister Gabrielle Williams and now Minister Natalie Hutchins, who are passionate and carried that momentum forward. The Act was passed in 2020 and came into effect in March 2021. So it's still very young. And most of you will remember with not so pleasant thoughts what was going on in March 2021. We were all locked down in our houses. Well, maybe you weren't so much out here, but we were certainly. I moved over to Melbourne straight into an apartment that I'd rented thinking I'd be there for a few months, and I set up the whole commission for my apartment with my foster daughter who came with me, who just finished year 12 and was not happy about being locked in with me. That was her worst nightmare. But anyway, I was appointed the first commissioner, which was extraordinary for me. I feel so privileged, and I remain excited about what we're doing here in Victoria. I'm in my second term now, 1 year into about 6-7 months into my second 4-year term. So what does the Act require? It, as was said in the introduction, it applies to about 300 public sector organisations, and that's public sector in the broader sense. So all 9 universities in Victoria are included in that, all local councils, all public health organisations, there's a lot of organisations in this region, and I've spent quite a bit of time out here. It sets clear obligations for action. Each duty holder is required to conduct a workplace gender audit, a comprehensive gender audit every 2 years against 7 key gender equality indicators. The gender composition of their governing body, in the case of councils, that's your elected members, the gender composition at all levels of the workforce, gender pay equity, workplace sexual harassment, recruitment and promotion practices, access to certain forms of leave and flexible work, and gendered occupational segregation. So that's where women are concentrated into particular industries and particular occupations, even though you might have equal numbers of women and men and people of other genders in your organisation. Each of those organisations has to use that data in consultation with their workforce and their governing body to develop a gender equality action plan that will see them through 4 years. We've had the first ones in 21-22, and we're coming up for the second gender equality action plans in May of next year. So that's exciting, 1 4-year kind of round. And I think we all know better what we're doing now, so I'm expecting to see much better quality gender equality action plans next time around. They also have to undertake gender impact assessments where they have to put a gender lens over every policy, program or service that has a direct and significant impact on the public. And I'll come back to that in a minute because that's really important. And they have to report on their progress to me every 2 years, comprehensively, what the gender impact assessments that they've done, how they're going with implementing the strategies in their action plan, and how they're going on those 7 key indicators. And they must make reasonable and material progress on each of those 7 key indicators, or have a really good reason for not making progress. And the reasons that are acceptable are actually included in the legislation. This isn't tick box reporting. It is about demonstrating real change. At a level of transparency not previously required of the public sector in Victoria, duty holders must publish their gender equality action plans, their data and their progress reports on their own public websites. The Act says that I may also do so. And when I was joined as Commissioner, I let it be known that I would be publishing. So you can actually go to my website and you can look at every single individual duty holder, and you can look at what their pay gap is, and you can look at what their rate of sexual harassment is. You can look at the flexible work and who's doing that flexible work. You can look at how many of the leaders are women, etc., etc. So we really want to hold these organisations to public scrutiny and public account. And, you know, I had the ABC on the phone literally about 3 seconds after we published the last lot of data. So the media holding our organisations to account. That's important when you have legislation. You've got to have teeth. As I said, my commission also publishes all of that as well, and we'll publish it over time. So you'll be able to see those trends and what's changing. You can look at an industry level, you can look at a whole of sector level, and as I said, you can look at each individual organisation. Some employees were shocked when they saw the pay gaps in their organisations. As I mentioned, it's important to have accountability in legislation like this. And as Commissioner, I was really pleased, coming from South Australia where I was Equal Opportunity Commissioner, looking at this legislation before I applied for the role, I saw that it had real teeth, and that was, you know, part of the reason that I put my hand up for the job, because real teeth, which I probably will never have to use because of that kind of transparency. But those real teeth, you know, basically say gender equality is not a nice to have anymore, it is a must have. And I think that's really important. So the teeth that I have range from informal resolution right up to enforceable action undertaken with the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. Bits in between are notifying relevant ministers and advising them to take action with the organisations, naming and shaming those organisations myself publicly, and so forth. As I said, I think that transparency is going to drive the change more than those. always will, but it's nice to have them in my back pocket in case I need to use them. And I will call out where organisations aren't making the progress that they need to make. I will bring those powers into action. I haven't done it thus far because organisations were getting used to the legislation, understanding it was the first time they developed their gender equality action plans and the first time they reported on progress. But I've let it be known to duty holders that that introductory period is over, and I will be taking action from now on where organisations haven't made progress and they don't have a reasonable excuse. The power of gender impact assessments, and I said I'd come back to this. And for those of you who've heard me speak about this before, you will know that I'm definitely going to mention my favourite book by author Caroline Criado Perez. I recommend that you read this book. I know there is a copy in your library because I have been here and I've been told that there definitely is. And hopefully there's more than one, but it is really well worth getting hold of because it is chock full of reasons why we need to put gender lenses over everything. So I'll give you some examples from the book that directly relate to local government. Perhaps not so much here, but certainly when I go up into the snow, which I did a few weeks ago to talk to duty holders in Omeo, snow clearing and urban planning is one of the gender impact assessments featured in this book. So this is based on a Swedish municipality where councils discovered that their snow clearing schedule was inadvertently discriminating against women. Now, when you think gender and snow clearing, you don't think there's going to be gendered impacts, but there was. So what they were doing when they were snow ploughing or snow clearing, they were clearing the roads over footpath instead of footpaths and cycle paths. They got to them later, but basically they were serving male commuting patterns because the men were getting in their cars and going to work, while disadvantaging women who were much more likely to walk or use public transport for shorter, more complex journeys involving school drop-offs and pickups and other care responsibilities and shopping, etc., and often going to work as well in between all of that. But their journeys were more complex, and they actually found that every winter there was this massive uptick in the number of slip falls, and the vast majority of them were women who were slipping. So when they reversed it, they found those slip falls dropped dramatically, the number of women who fell dropped dramatically, and they didn't get any more car accidents because it's actually quite easy to drive a heavy vehicle through a few centimetres of snow. So there you go. You don't know until you do it whether it's going to have gendered impacts. Public toilet allocation, again, this is a real beef of mine. Women take up to 2.3 times longer on average to use a toilet than men. And I can assure you that is not because we sit on the toilet scrolling through our social media feed while other women, cross their legs outside. It's because we can't use urinals. We have to go into a cubicle and we have to take our clothes up and down. We have periods, we need to change pads and tampons. We have urinary tract infections at 4 times the rate of men, and anyone that's had one of those will know you have to go to the toilet more frequently. We get pregnant, that puts pressure on our bladder. We have small children often when we're going to the toilet with us. And so there are massive queues outside of every women's toilet that you go to, with the exception of your performing arts centre across the road, which has amazing toilets, and I'm told about them, and I've visited them so many times when I've come to Geelong. I've taken photos in those toilets. They're very proud of them, but I even heard about them at the local high school. So, yeah, it's big news. But it's a clear example of where equal allocation does not result in equality, right? I know that construction is about 3% women, and so I'm betting that the people that designed the building code that said that you should have equal space for women's and men's toilets did not put a gender lens over that, and equal space does not equal outcomes. And the City of Port Phillip have done something about this as well. So their gender impact assessment on their 10-year public toilet plan found that for every 2 toilets for women, they had 3 for men. So they were really taking it in the opposite direction. And they're now addressing this inequality whilst also providing some inclusive all-gender facilities as well. Public safety and urban design, you would know, street lighting and public space design has often failed to consider that women experience public spaces differently due to safety concerns, and this affects their mobility, their access to services and their participation in community life. Transport planning. Research shows that transport planning often reflects male usage patterns, so those longer linear commutes to city centres, rather than the shorter, more complex journeys that I mentioned before that women are doing with school drop-offs and pickups and so forth, and elder care and service visits and so on. All of that unpaid caring work that women do. And that is why the Gender Equality Act requires our duty holders to put a gender lens over everything that has a direct and significant impact on the public that is new or that comes up for review. Because if we don't, we get the kind of outcomes that I've been talking about. So we've had more than 1,500 gender impact assessments reported to us in 2024, and 75% of them have led directly to actions that promote gender equality. So they have been found to have been going to produce gendered outcomes without that gender lens. And so whether it's in regional councils or catchment management authorities or government departments, museums or universities, even cemeteries. I've visited some fantastic cemeteries. Who knew what cemeteries were doing? But they've basically shone a light on these systemic gender inequality issues and paved the way for real improvements. I think it's also a secret weapon in our organisations because the people that do gender impact assessments don't sit in HR, they sit right across the organisation. They're often men, people of other genders as well. So once you see the gendered outcomes, you've done that, you then see them everywhere. And so I think it helps to shift the mindset as well. And to date, local government is the best performing industry in the public sector for doing gender impact assessments. So what does the data tell us? The progress report data from 2023, we've got more data coming in at the end of this year, so December 1st, 2025. But from 2023, which was the last lot of data that we had, it's a mixed story. There has been movement. All but one industry reduced their gender pay gap, not by much, but by a move in the right direction. The Victorian public sector overall pay gap is 15.1%. Local government recorded the very smallest pay gap. They are at 3.5%, and that was a 1.9% drop from 2021. So well done, local government. It's fantastic. Police and emergency services, male-dominated area, a male-dominated industry sector, had the most significant drop. Their pay gap dropped. It was very high, but it dropped 7.6% in 2 years, down to 10.5%. And the health sector, so women-concentrated industry, 77% of employees in health are women. It has the highest pay gap of all. It is now 31.9%, 31.9%. But that's a drop of 2.1%, so, it did go in the right direction. A long way to go. I often go out to health services and they'll say, this doesn't happen very often now, but it did when I first came on board. And they'll say, but we're women concentrated. Why do we need to worry about gender equality? And tell them the pay gap, and then they realise, we don't have equality here. Women comprise 66% of the public sector workforce, but they hold only 48% of senior leadership positions. That's a 1% increase from 2021. And we did see a 5% increase in women CEOs from 39% to 44%. So that's not a bad increase in 2 years. And parental leave even offers a glimmer of hope. We're not going to be holding a party about this one, but the uptake of parental leave by men rose slightly. It was an average of 3.9 weeks, and it went to 5.2. So you can see what I mean about not holding a party about that one, but again, it's going in the right direction. We need it to be 50%, basically. The gaps, though, still persist. Women do remain underrepresented in leadership roles and overrepresented in insecure, part-time, casual, etc. And alarmingly, sexual harassment went in the wrong direction between 2021 and 2023, which I found astounding. So there was an increase in sexual harassment of women and gender-diverse people. Quite significant for gender-diverse people, actually. And the sexual harassment of men stayed the same. We've just put out a report, insights report on sexual harassment and an insights report on the gender pay gap. It's using the 2023 to 21 to 23 data, and we've really done a deep dive and looked all over the world for what is the best advice about what to do about sexual harassment and what to do about the gender pay gap. So you can go and hunt those down on our website. The pay gap's a really challenging one. Nationally, the pay gap costs women $2.56 for every hour they work. $2.56 for every hour. And KPMG did research to find out what was that comprised of, what were the components contributing to the gender pay gap. And they found that of that $2.56, 51 cents of this is due to career interruptions, so women taking time out for caring responsibilities. 50 cents is due to industrial segregation, so being in industries that are low paid because they're concentrated. They're women concentrated. They're not valued as highly as others. 27 cents is down to part-time work. 10 cents is down to occupational segregation. So again, being in occupations that women tend to predominate in healthcare, administration, clerical work, and so forth. Having said that, every single occupation in the public sector has a pay gap in favour of men, even the ones where women predominate. So even administration and clerical work has a pay gap in favour of men. It's extraordinary. And then the 6 cents is down to unpaid domestic labour. Now, if you're good at maths, you will have added all of that up and you realise there's 91 cents of the pay gap that is still unaccounted for. And that KPMG says they can't account for that. What's that down to? That's down to bias. It's down to discrimination, conscious and unconscious. And those costs compound over a lifetime. They affect not just women's earnings, but they affect their superannuation, as we know. But that affects our financial freedom and our safety often. The Act is also the first of its kind to embed intersectionality into it, and this is really vital. Intersectional analysis helps us understand how different forms of discrimination like sexism and ableism, so thinking about people with disability, ageism, queerphobia, racism, how they can interact to create unique forms of inequality. When we analysed the data from our duty holder organisations in 2023, the findings were stark. First Nations women had a 21% pay gap. Women with disabilities and culturally, racially marginalised women had a 19% pay gap. Gender diverse workers had an 18% pay gap, and that's compared to straight, white, able, cisgendered men. And the leadership gaps were even more striking. So only 3% of culturally and racially marginalised women were in senior roles, 5% of women with disabilities, and 6% of First Nations women. And that was compared to 14% of straight, white, able men. And here's the statistic that really illustrates the compounding nature of gender discrimination. So men with disabilities and First Nations men, on average, were paid more than non-Indigenous women and women without disability. So the pay gaps went, who was paid highest if we take disability? Men without disability, next highest paid, men with disability, then women without disability, then women with disability. So you can see how gender and ableism or disability discrimination combine to really compound the disadvantage of women with disabilities. And that same trajectory stood up whatever we looked at. So really important. Sexual harassment also affects different women differently. Highest among employees with disability, LGBTIQ plus employees and younger women. So intersectionality isn't optional, right? If we can't just build systems that address inequality for some women, we have to think about all women. And sometimes when we don't think about all women, we're really just designing stuff for women who have relative privilege. So we are effectively replicating inequality if we don't address intersectionality. So what makes the Gender Equality Act transformative is that it addresses the fundamental shortcomings of previous anti-discrimination approaches. So traditional anti-discrimination legislation has been reactive. We wait for individual complaints of harm and then we deal with them individually. I know because I was Equal Opportunity Commissioner in South Australia, and that's what I did over and over and over again. Often, different woman, same perpetrator of sexual harassment, different person, same organisation, perpetrating racism. And I was frustrated because I wasn't actually able to do anything except solve those individual issues for those individual people, and it did nothing to make the organisations change. They had enough money to just pay those things out. They were a nuisance because, like, the payouts aren't very high in these cases. So that's why it was so exciting to see this legislation. We don't want to place the burden on victims to prove discrimination over and over and over again. We're taking a systemic approach. So rather than asking individuals to challenge discrimination after the fact, we require organisations to examine their structures and their policies and their practices to prevent discrimination from occurring in the first place. And that reflects a deeper understanding that gender inequality isn't just about individual bad actors, but about systems and structures that consistently produce unequal outcomes. What high-performing organisations do differently? They don't just comply with the Act, they actually use it as a lever for genuine change. They see gender equality as a strategic priority. Their leaders are visible and accountable and willing to engage with the discomfort of their own data, often. They set targets and they track progress. They resource the work properly, which is actually required under the legislation. They listen to lived experience and they embed gender analysis into their planning, into their budgeting, into their service design, and they also understand that this work is long-term. Culture doesn't shift in a single reporting cycle over 2 years, not much anyway. But when done well, the impact can be really powerful. And of course, we know not everyone is on board. We've seen resistance, both overt and subtle. Some try to reframe the work as divisive. You know, what about men? Some push for exemptions. Others say they support gender equality, but then they stall when action's required. The idea of equality can provoke strong feelings because these are long-held social norms that are being challenged, and they must be challenged. And this is why we take transparency and enforcement seriously. We're moving into a more sustainable future for the Commission. We've had our learning, we've had our trainer wheels on for a few years now, and I think we're ready to help organisations, and I hope organisations are ready to really embed gender equality as business as usual. We're working now to build organisational capability, to strengthen gender impact assessments, because our research showed that while we got quite a few, a lot of organisations are still having problems with that. We're really pushing intersectionality now, requiring organisations to start submitting that data, and we'll start taking action over the next couple of years if they don't have that. And as I said, we're focusing on compliance and enforcement with a proportionate approach, obviously. We're continuing to invest in research and the evidence base to the extent that we possibly can. As I said, the next reporting cycle begins in 2025, December 1, 2025, when we'll get the next approximately 40 million data points from the organisations that report under the legislation. We've got about 80 so far, 80 million, that is. And this is the first time organisations will submit both their progress report and their next gender equality action plan at the same time. So a lot of work for them, a lot of work for us. We are 14 FTE, including me. So we all stop what we're doing and focus on compliance assessment of all of the reports that come in. I think what I want to say in closing is that local government is critically important, and so to everyone in this room, your leadership matters. You influence both your workforce and your community. You set the tone and the culture and the conditions for change, and your work has and continues to change the story. But you know there's still a lot more work to be done, and that's why it's really important that groups like Women in Local Democracy continue to lead the vital work to empower women to lead in public life. We know, as I said at the start, that councils do better, organisations do better when they've got better gender balance, and that's critically important. Change is happening. I know we've had a setback with local government elections, but we do need to stay focused. In fact, we need to focus even more. The gender equality that we've promised Victorians, it won't be delivered by good intentions. It will be delivered by action, and it will be delivered by accountability and by leadership, and that includes all of you. To the aspiring councillors in the room tonight, your community needs your voice, your perspective and your leadership. To the current councillors, you are role models and trailblazers. Your presence matters and your advocacy for other women matters. To everyone working to build a more representative democracy, from wild members to other community advocates, you are the change agents making this transformation possible. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for your time tonight, and thank you for your commitment to building a future where gender is no barrier to opportunity, safety or leadership for anyone. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions. Okay, I think we've got a microphone. No microphone? There is a microphone. Okay, fantastic.
Thank you. My name's Sally Fisher. I'm a community organiser with the Real Deal Geelong Alliance. Our community's greatest need is secure housing. And we see at the local level that is very firmly a gender issue here, and intersectional as well. We have very strong examples of that. We're deeply concerned about the sell-off of social housing in our northern suburbs, and also the City of Greater Geelong itself is proposing to sell off land which was originally designated for social housing. I'd like to encourage you to expand on how we can perhaps use this lever of gender impact assessments to drive better informed decision making on this issue, please.
Well, you've got Ali sitting next to you.
I know that. Difficult question.
And you could use the gender impact assessments because you know that council has to do them, and if you don't see them, then you can ask questions, and you can certainly come to me and tell me about that. I have whistleblowers all over the state telling me where gender impact assessments haven't been done inside of organisations and out. That's why we make them transparent. So you as a community can go and have a look at the gender impact assessments that your council has done. And if you know they're moving on something and it hasn't had a gender lens put over it, you can take action. That's why we're making it transparent. It's a critical issue. I absolutely understand. I'm not a specialist in that area. But yeah, absolutely. Use the Gender Equality Act as a lever to get the change that you want to see. Because if you do put a gender lens over it, you'll see gendered outcomes, as you say, and intersectional gendered outcomes. Yes, so on the website of the Commission's website, we have a generic how to do a gender impact assessment, and we're developing, and they're about to be published, some specific examples of gender impact assessments for local council and for health services. They're our two biggest industry groups among duty holders. You can go and have a look and download all of that information, all of those resources. There are case studies, there are videos. There is so much on gender impact assessments on our website, and our website has thankfully just been redone, and it's not so messy and sludgy as it was before, so you should be able to actually find them all in the one place. I do talk publicly a lot outside of public organisations, and I'm actually going to I forget what it is, a Council of Architects or something, which is doing housing, the gender responsive housing in Parliament in a few weeks' time, because they are starting to use gender lenses over their designs and the built environment. There is a lot of interest. Everywhere I go, I talk about this. So, and most organisations go, "Oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. We should do it." So, our resources are there for anyone to freely use. But I reckon the first step is Caroline Criado Perez's book, Invisible Women, because you'll be so angry. You'll be like, you can use it at dinner parties, everywhere you go. You can cite examples and with passion about why this needs to happen, and I think that helps get it over the line.
So just once you find the best practice, do you then publish that for all of the councils to look at, or all the cemeteries, or all of the...
We try to do as much of that as we can. Councils only have to report what policies, programs or services they have done a GIA on, what were the a summary of the outcomes that took account of gender, so any adjustments and so forth. I'm hoping I'll get more power to ask more questions from the ACT's review, but at the moment that's all we can do. Where on my duty holder visits around the state, I've been coming across some really great examples, and we've made videos of them and so forth. There is, as I say, we've got a fairly generic how to do a GIA, and that needs to be adapted for specific circumstances. So they're all quite different. A gender impact assessment in health is going to look very different to one, at a cemetery, for example. So that's why we keep it generic. But there are some great examples on the website.
Thank you, Dr. Vincent. Rosemary Kiss is my name. I'm a member of WILD for a long time.
I can't hear, sorry.
A bit closer? Is that
That's better, yeah.
Good. Thank you again. I'm Rosemary Kiss and I'm a member of WILD, or certainly have been for a long time. I was just wondering whether you see what I describe loosely as institutional structural obstructions to gender equality. In other words, those barriers which are not easily seen, but which we often come up against. Would you comment on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the ACT. That's why it's, what it's designed to address. Liz Broderick, when she was Sex Discrimination Commissioner, called it the gender asbestos, right? The unseen kind of asbestos that is embedded in the walls and the floors and the ceilings of organisations that prevent women from getting ahead. And that's absolutely what we're seeing. But, the 7 key indicators that I mentioned under the Act, and which organisations must make reasonable and material progress on every 2 years, they can't be changed without fixing those structures. You can fix a pay gap instantly. You can just pay the women in your organisation more. But the next time you recruit, if you haven't fixed the discrimination and the gender bias and so forth, you'll be doing exactly the same thing again, and the next time you measure your pay gap, it'll be back. Unless you fix those structures that are preventing women's progress, women getting into leadership, pay equity, you won't make that change that I require you to make and will be holding organisations to account for. So as I say, I have real hope with this legislation that we're not just doing a tick and flick, that we are embedding, or organisations themselves are embedding, the sorts of actions that will lead to real change, real structural change. It's not going to happen overnight though, and we see setbacks obviously from time to time, but I am absolutely convinced everywhere I go around this state, people get it. They understand it, they want it to change. And my team have felt really reluctant in saying, organisations haven't made enough progress, they were worried, they're doing their best, etc., etc. And some of the women in those organisations have said, no, send out a compliance notice, please, because that's the only way my boss is going to take notice of this. So, we have that tension, and that's why I'm saying now that I will be coming down on compliance, because the women and gender diverse people of Victoria want that and deserve that. So we will get change over time, but it's not rapid. Yeah.
Dr. Vincent, thank you for that. I was actually thinking, I think the work that you're doing and the legislation you're working with is wonderful. That is making change, or it is on the way to making significant change. I'm trying to get at, or asking you to consider, beyond your brief,
Yeah.
what would you say are obstructive elements within our political and social system which work against gender equality?
How long have you got? Yeah, from you. Well, I mean, I have a foster daughter. I have 4 kids and lots of grandkids, but I've had her since she's 13. She's 22 now, and she's got a 2-year-old. And when she was pregnant, she said to me, "Can you come to the ultrasound where we find out the gender of the baby? And I don't want you to tell me what it is, because I'm going to have a gender reveal party and then we're going to find out." And I said, "That's against my religion." And she said, "Hard luck, you're my mum, you have to do it." So I did. But, before a baby is even born, we are gendering, right? We are deciding what clothes it's going to wear, what colour the nursery is going to be, the kind of books and toys that we're going to buy for that young person. They are born into a very stereotype, gendered world, and then that continues. Even if you've got feminist parents and you skip all of that for the first few years, when you go to childcare, you get boys and girls line up in different lines and do different things and different toys. You get that in schools, you get that in career counselling. Girls are channelled into particular areas and boys into other areas. We've got gender norms coming out in advertising, in television shows. We're just awash with it. So, there's no one thing. And we've got to address all of those things. I feel a relief, because that's overwhelming, and at least I've got a bite-sized chunk that I can work with to allow me some sanity. But it's a drop in the ocean, a big one, but we've got all these other things that we've got to deal with as well. Right, someone over here. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Vincent. It's obviously very disappointing to hear about the increase in terms of sexual harassment numbers. And we know there are many, many barriers to people reporting sexual harassment. Yeah. Is there any analysis being done about whether that increase is reflective of an increased tendency to actually report instances which would not have previously been even taken through those channels?
Yeah, look, it could be. What I'm looking for when I look at sexual harassment, we use 2 forms of data. We use the workforce data, so what are the formal reports of sexual harassment? And then we use employee experience data, so anonymous data about who's experienced sexual harassment. There's a lot of sexual harassment that experience and very little that is formally reported, although some in the employee experience, we do ask, have you formally reported? And a lot more people say they have reported it than we have formal reports. So we're missing data. And we're missing data because they're not reporting it up to HR, they're reporting it to their direct manager. And there we have no quality control. We don't know what's happening. We don't know whether that manager's handled it appropriately, et cetera, et cetera. So we're really pushing for organisations to actually capture data at a level of the immediate managers and put training in. It may be that there's more awareness. What in order to see progress, it's not just awareness, it's safety in reporting. So we didn't see an increase in the data in people saying they were reporting, and we saw a decrease in formal reports. And the formal reports are shabby. They don't, they keep really bad records. They don't look at outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, so little data on that. It's really, really shameful. So what I'm looking for is to see a decrease overall in the experience and an increase in the formal reporting. That's the ultimate outcome, or the capturing more of that formal reporting. What I'll accept is, in the interim, is that you've got your experience of sexual harassment stays the same, but you've got more formal reporting, or that goes down. We will accept other things than perfect while organisations are putting their strategies in place, and particularly health services. Sexual harassment is really high in health services because health workers are often sexually harassed by patients and members of the public and so forth. It's a really difficult problem to deal with. And they don't report it because they feel sorry for their patients, and they think, I don't want to make their situation worse. So, yeah, it's not as simple. Where it went up, often organisations said to me, oh, that's because we've made people aware. And I'm like, well, if I'm not seeing more formal reporting, then I'm sorry, that's not progress as far as I'm concerned. So that's why we put out this report, this insights report, to help organisations get better at that.
Time for one more question.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. That was a really insightful discussion. Just around the working with, I'm not sure if there's a Volunteering Victoria or there's, Volunteering Australia. The unpaid volunteering and measuring kind of the social and sport volunteering and volunteering at school and on school councils and things. Kind of what levers does the Commission have in working with other organisations to make great impact to encourage more volunteering from all genders?
None, unfortunately. Volunteers aren't included under the Gender Equality Act because they are not public sector employees. This was a contentious thing, and I know the Minister at the time was, really wanted volunteers included. And of course, there are some of our duty holder organisations are largely volunteer organisations, fire organisations and SES, for example. We have run a pilot with one of those organisations. I think it wasn't SES, I think it was the fire authorities, where we looked at the data that they were collecting on their volunteers. And so we've got that study, and we've potentially got that as something that we could include in future. But it was challenging for those organisations because they don't get paid, they don't record some of the things in the same way. But it is something that, there is some impetus for change in that regard.
Maybe it can be through the funding levers through the local councils to those organisations?
Yeah, potentially, yep. Yeah. Thank you so much. I will leave you.
It's always the way. There are more questions than we have time for. Just wonderful. I'd like to welcome our patron tonight to come forward and formally thank Dr. Niki Vincent for her fantastic speech. Libby Coker probably doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. Is that okay? Libby is the Labor member for Corangamite, first elected to the Federal Parliament in 2019 and re-elected for her third term this year. A Surf Coast resident for 30 years, Libby's a former teacher, journalist, local councillor, having served 12 years on local council, including 2 terms as mayor. Her strong history of community service and support for her 2 daughters have shaped the values she brings to her national role. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Libby Coker, our federal member for Corangamite and the patron of Empowering Women 50/50 Network, to thank Dr. Vincent for her words and also to speak about the future plans for the network. Thank you, Libby.
Thank you very much.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wadawurrung, our First Nations people. I'd also like to thank you, Talia, for your beautiful words and acknowledging your female leaders that have actually supported you to be here tonight and who've had an influence on your life. That was a beautiful, intro for us, beautiful welcome to country. I would also like to acknowledge Christine. It is NAIDOC week, and I've bumped into you at a few events this week, but I think in acknowledging Chris, I'm also acknowledging the work that the state government has done, because, Niki, we would not be able to do what we do here if it wasn't for the state government leading with policy on gender equality that actually leads to commissioners having a role to play and for us to having a strong guidance in terms of the outcomes we want to achieve. So, I have to give a shout out to the state on what you've done there, in a similar way to what you're doing in terms of Indigenous leadership as well. And that follows on to federal government as well, because at federal level we now have more than 50%, well more than 50% women in our caucus, in the Labor caucus. It's an astounding achievement. Yeah. And it's come about because we do have quotas. And I know that at state level in the opposition there is discussion about quotas, and at a federal level as well. And I do believe that it is of value. And what it means is that the issues that impact women are being, I think, championed much more so. So whether it is about the gender pay gap and making big organisations now, the top 200 from memory, actually have to name what the gender pay gap is and how they are going to make that difference and reduce it. And that is now publicly available. And I think that is important, as well as many other things. So improving the wages of people in females in feminised workforces is important. So whether it is in childcare or whether it's in aged care, we have increased those wages because we believe that that is fair and right. So also in women's health, things like the issues impacting women particularly, whether it's endometriosis, whether it's menopause, whether it is the cost of contraception. These are all things that in the past have not been a focus and which we believe should be a focus. It's not just about health, it's also about cost of living and the pressures facing women. The cost of contraception shouldn't be an impact on you when we're facing cost of living pressures at the moment. But I also want to give a shout out to the female councillors in the room. So Emma, Robin, Lisa Patterson, Libby Stapleton, Emma Sinclair. You've all played a role in pushing in your own councils for gender equity. I know you're all passionate about it, and I want to congratulate you on being re-elected. We also have people that didn't quite make it, but really pushed hard. And one of them, Kate Lockhart, is one of those who I stood on pre-poll line with. And I'm really pleased to see that you are now the President of Wild, and I want to congratulate you this evening, as well as Jenny Wills, who is the outgoing, has played such an amazing role. I know you're still going to be involved, but I just want to congratulate you. You've actually been such a stalwart, you've pushed so hard, your passion continues, as does the committee, and so congratulations to you. And Ali Wasty is a female CEO of the City of Greater Geelong. I know that you have a strong focus on equity, and there's always work to be done, but it's great to have a woman at the helm. Jodie Hill, CEO of Women's Health and Wellbeing in the Barwon Southwest. Helen Bolton, CEO of Respect Australia, and Beryl McMillan, President of Zonta, which is a great organisation that has supported women for many years. So to Dr. Niki Vincent, the work you're doing is absolutely essential to see that women do achieve leadership. We all know that women's leadership makes for a better country, for better outcomes. When women do better, we all do better, because, to be honest, women are often those who have that nurturing role. It's not always the case, but I think that by giving that sense of fairness and equity, giving us opportunity, we actually all thrive so much better. So the work you're doing is invaluable, and your knowledge is exceptional. So, and your passion is obviously there. So I want to, on behalf of all of us, thank you for what you do. It is the first oration. I'm looking forward to having many more as the years go by. And I do want to say that we shouldn't get too downhearted. I know that there is much to be done, but the World Economic Forum 2025 Global Gender Gap Report, we have seen Australia rise 11 places in the global ranking to 13th out of 148 countries for gender equality. And this is the highest ever ranking since the index began in 2006. So we are taking steps, but I do know that there is much more to do. And from a federal perspective, I'm really passionate to make sure that we continue to make that difference in so many areas. So really, I would like to just conclude by saying thank you all for being here and for helping us to lead the charge on this. We have elections coming up with the state. I want to see women elected, and then we all need to work towards the next local government elections. And I should actually give Rowan Story a shout out as a male councillor here who's representing the male cohort. Thank you for being here this evening. And just to say that we do need to work hard to keep that balance between men and women. It does make a difference. So thank you so much for having me this evening.
Now, as Libby said, we have a new president of Women in Local Democracy. It gives me great pleasure to introduce her now. Kate Lockhart is a highly experienced natural resource management and community engagement professional. She's built a life, family and community on the Bellarine while pursuing her passions, advocacy, environmental education and community-driven programs, often with a gender focus. She comes to Wild after 10 years of leadership with Bellarine Landcare, and Kate was also a recipient of the Women Leading Locally Fellowship and a Council Women in Community Life Awards for community action, for climate action. She was a very competitive but unlucky candidate at the last council elections and a reluctant federal candidate for the Corangamite seat in 2025. Kate is currently participating in the Geelong Community Leadership Program. So join me in welcoming Kate Lockhart, the WILD President.
Thanks, Loretta. Thanks, Talia, I think, who might have left the building. I just did want to say that it was lovely to hear her talk about the women that have come before her, and I just wanted to say that those women have also played their part in directly enabling the broader community to find their voice and support Indigenous people and women. So I thought it was really, really good. Mary, I remember both Mary and Karuna just holding a space to give me time to stop talking so that I could try to see the world the way they see the world, and the power in silence and real active listening. It was not lost on me, so thank you. So yes, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Wadawurrung, which we meet. I'd like to thank you, Niki, absolutely brilliant. Yes, it's clear that you're doing a great job, and we've got more work to do, but it is really exciting. And I think, you've given us food for thought about how we might hear council's story in relation to their reporting and their progress in the future. So that's great. And thank you, of course, to Libby. Yes, I was a reluctant federal candidate, and very grateful to be here as a product of the Women in Local Democracy. Some of you will know I was a local council candidate, and it was because of the work that Women in Local Democracy was doing for women in Geelong that I then made the progress through to run at local council level. So I'll now get back on script, and lovely to see all the local councillors that we've touched, and also the candidates that have played a part. They tell us in all these leadership things that participation is also winning, but there's there's relative, isn't there? There's absolute and then there's relative. Anyway, thank you for coming tonight. I have written here that it has been a tough 6 months for women in local democracy as we comprehend the outcome of the local council elections in spring 2024. Despite Wild's best efforts over more than 2 years and across the 10 years too, but quite a focus in the last 2 years before the council elections to give local women an opportunity to find their voice, to illustrate their expertise and learn the trade of running as a candidate and getting a better understanding of how to participate responsibly as a local council law. So despite our best efforts to find, foster and elevate excellent candidates across every ward, we saw gender representation fall in the City of Greater Geelong, and the consequences of less diversity are having a deep and destructive consequences for our entire community. And I'm not being hysterical here or overly emotional. These are the facts that the decisions that have been made in the last 6 months with the new council have hurt us deeply, and it's not lost on me. But here we are tonight to celebrate our inaugural annual oration, and I want to thank Niki for her voice and contribution, but I also ask you that each of you reflect on the circles in which you move. Are your clubs and committees working towards gender parity, or are they still top-heavy with one gender, one ethnicity, or one socio-economic group? What will you take home from tonight back to your circles, your kitchen table, your staff canteen, your classroom, to start conversations to bring about positive changes? Because as we heard, we need to have these conversations at every level and call it out when we can. When we have the power and the strength to do that, we need to do that. We can't just wait for our once every 4 years or 3 years at a federal level to find our voice and to have our voices heard. And so this year in Wild, we've made good progress towards incorporating a new committee and a new executive from that group. We hope that you can see that we continue to improve our diversity within our ranks, and we'll strive to do so more broadly to advocate for all of us. The Wild's Future Committee has a new executive. Kate Lockhart is president. Jenna, and if you hear your name, could you just stand up and wave? Jenna Wade has come in as vice president. Secretary is Beck Thorsland, and treasurer Azadeh Jutsi. We've got new members, Beryl McMillan, Alita Moriarty, and Therese Slater. And we have continuing members, Nina Akhtar, Maria Bowen. Ellen White is apology, she's in Canada with my sister. And no one needs an introduction, but the beautiful, the amazing, the extraordinary, intelligent Jenny Wills is continuing to support us, and that's fantastic. So the new group will meet shortly to develop our 3 or 4 year plan to focus on the November 2028 local council elections. We'll use the first 2 years to build our membership more broadly across the expanded geographic region of City of Greater Geelong and our neighbouring councils. So that is good. Now we're on to the last page. And in the second half, we'll really sit and focus on that 2 year plan to find, encourage, coach, support, mentor, without speaking out of turn from our committee to mentor those potential candidates for the November 2028 election. So stay tuned to that. Now, our future is bright. I've got a green jacket on, it's nice and bright. But we would not be here without the outstanding work of our founding members over the last 10 years. 3 of these brilliant, bright, generous women are retiring from the Wild Committee. So can you please join me in thanking Priscilla Prescott, Rosemary Kiss and Rosemary Nugent, who are, after their long services, are gracefully, I think gleefully stepping aside. And so we have, Maria was going to hop up and give those beautiful women some flowers. Which are in the chair. Yes, so Priscilla, no one's, and she's here in front, she's one in front. And I've got the thank you cards, I'll give them to you in a minute. So thank you, ladies. I've spent a little bit of time on the committee in the last sort of 6 or 12 months and getting to know them, and the intelligence and the eloquence in which they speak and the respectful nature in which they speak to each other, to us, is something that I'll remember. So thank you. 2 of them have got OAM after their name too, just quietly. So we're not just local good girls, they're remarkable women. So thank you very much. And I hope that as on behalf of the new committee, we can continue to do your good work because I'd like to think that to a large extent, I for one am a product of your good work. And so I hope that you too are hopeful of the future. So thank you. Now, leadership has many forms, and Jenny Wills is a true leader who has been a part of Wild from its foundation, and although she's continuing, I do think we need to acknowledge that it's absolutely, this is Jenny's show tonight. She's done a remarkable job. She's turned every stone. She's written media releases. She's activated her entire network. She's been persistent and consistent, and Niki, when did she book you in? Like 9 months ago, or when you were last here 12 months ago? So Jenny is very big boots to follow, but we've got a committee, so we've got diversity, and so hopefully between us all, I hope that we can continue to do a good job. So thank you, Jenny. And we've got a little gift for you too. Yes, because it's very hard to get things done when your organisation, when Jenny's at the centre. It's hard to keep a secret from her. So well done. Thanks, Maria. And lastly, can I thank you all for coming tonight, and can I just again reiterate, please take home some of the stats and insights to other people. But I just also wanted to lastly thank Loretta Hart and the library organisation for her generous contribution to Wild, not just here tonight as an MC, which was, I think she did an exceptional job. She was very well organised and very formal, and I'm very impressed. But also for her voice and advocacy every week on Pulse Radio. She finds good women and good men to tell amazing stories every Wednesday morning from 9 till 12, and I know she's provided a safe space for many of us to find our voice and push our passions and share those with the broader community. So I just want to thank you very much.
This little thank you fest at the end. Wonderful. So as we this evening comes to a close, I'm also going to thank our fantastic speakers, to Talia, to Niki, Libby and Kate. Thank you for your leadership, your wisdom and your vision. I also like to thank the wider Wild Group and the Geelong Regional Library Corporation for helping make this night possible. And thank you all for being here and supporting this very powerful movement. Gender equity is not a women's issue, it's a community issue. It's about fairness, inclusion, and ensuring that every voice is heard and valued at the table where decisions are made. The Empowering Women 50/50 network is our collective commitment to this work, to seeing more women in local leadership and to shaping a future that is balanced, representative and just. So thanks for sharing this moment, and let's keep the momentum going. Thank you.